Well, this one really did sneak up on me. I'm sitting here chatting with Angela, and she says, "Are we recording?" I said, "What are you talking about? Are we recording?" Oh my God, it's time to go on. So here we are, Friday night at a live stream. How you doing, Angela?
I'm doing well. Professional as always.
Yes. Yeah, professional as always. Now your sound is perfect now. And it was like, a couple minutes ago, it's like, now it's just perfect. So good.
Okay.
Maybe this will be a good night. It seems like the last couple of live streams I've done, I've had some snafus. So maybe we'll be snafu free. We'll see. But if we're, there's nothing wrong with snafus.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yes, right. So anyway, it's good to see everybody out there. Jackie is there, Anchor's there, Dale is there, and I know Laughing Dog is there, and there's some people probably in Facebook who I can't identify because their names don't show up, but that's cool. But there's like 12 people already, and we haven't even started. I'm so grateful to you guys to come and listen and participate like this. This is the best part of my week, and it wouldn't be the same without you guys. So thank you for that. So what we're going to do today, we're going to just have a little meeting, and hopefully you guys will participate. You can do that in a couple of ways, either by chatting in the chat here or by calling us at our toll-free number. But we're going to have a reading from anonymous people on Facebook. That's right. We're going to have a reading from Beyond Belief Agnostic Musings for 12-Step Life, and it's today's reading, and it just turns out to be a really interesting one. So I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then we will base our conversation around this. So this is from April 9th, and the quote is, "If I leave this 12-step meeting and get hit by a bus, don't take me to another 12-step meeting. Take me to a hospital." And that's a quote from Father Joe Martin. Hi, Joe. 1920. He lived from 1924 to 2009. All right, so here's the reading. Recovery programs do solve a lot of problems in life. The 12 steps have been defined as a toolbox of wrenches that can fit any nut. Many of us come here to conquer one problem and get on with life. To our surprise, working the steps has more far-reaching value. We read our program literature over and over again, not because this is pleasure reading or because the 12 steps are a cure-all. Reading is one of the rituals that some of us incorporate into a recovery lifestyle. But, as pointed out above, not every problem calls for a 12-step remedy. Many problems need professional and/or expert help. Help we can't expect to find in meetings. We may need a guidance counselor, relationship therapist, psychiatrist, trainer, or medical doctor. Because the program has helped in more ways than we bargained for, we run the risk of putting the program of recovery on a fix-all pedestal. Self-help fellowships are people sharing their experience with each other, no less and no more. Most of us have problems other than addiction. Some of us are candid about what ails us and what we are taking for it. Some of us keep those cards close to our chest. Addicts tend to need help in other mental health areas. The National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism reports that alcoholics are 2 to 3 times more likely to have anxiety disorders or other concurrent psychiatric disorders than members of the general population. Do I have right-sized expectations about my program and fellowship? Have I ever caught myself talking about 12-step recovery as a cure-all or a one-stop shop? Wow, really good reading, and I think it's going to make for hopefully an interesting conversation. Angela, what are your thoughts on that reading?
Oh, I love it. I think we've talked about this in a couple of different capacities on other podcasts, particularly after you went through the training that you did to become a peer counselor. In your area, that shone a lot of light on different ideas and ways of looking at recovery. I like this because it is something that I've experienced in meetings where people do share that, all they needed, is AA and the 12 steps. And, sometimes they do it very dramatically. Like I think I've shared before, the guy who said that, he was basically, schizophrenic, and that, he came to AA and everything, was fine. And in some capacities, I can see that, he could have had a lot of these behaviors, and then, been diagnosed as schizophrenic when he was a really bad alcoholic, and stopped drinking, and so some of those things went away. But I really don't believe that 12 steps recovery can cure schizophrenia,
No.
and so I think it's a little dangerous, or not that helpful to be thinking of it that way. I think it's much more helpful to think of it as a place, a fellowship where we share our experience with each other, and as different tools that we can gain if we go to the meetings and listen and share. So yeah, but it is something, when it's not that dramatic, it's still, sometimes people say that it's all that they needed, or that they can apply it to everything in their life, which in some cases you can, but that's kind of like, a horoscope. If I read something that says, Sagittarian, today will blah, 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 then, then I'll look for things that agree with that, throughout my day, and, or the people that say, if you're having a problem, you just open the big book, and, whatever you put your finger on will, be the answer, or will help
that's
you.
crazy.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, I can also do that with my horoscope, and so, and I'm not big into horoscopes. I'm a Sagittarian, more skeptical. Get it? Anyway, so yeah, but it is something that people talk about, and I think part of it is that, like is discussed in this reading, a lot of us come in, and there's so much that it does help. Yeah. And one of the things that I was thinking about of how it seems to apply, or how it could be argued that it applies, is like for me with work situations, which I've frequently talked about, because that was such a difficult for me in early recovery. I would share with my sponsor, about, my boss who is being a jerk and micromanaging, and this person that I just don't get along with and irritates me, and I'm there to work and not have to deal with this person. And, my sponsor said, well, actually, that's part of having a job. That's part of what they hire you to do, is get along with people. Like, what? That's just crazy talk. They hired me to, answer the phone, or, whatever the job description was. But, technically, if you think about it, they're also hiring you, to get along with people. They think you'd be a good fit. And so it was a different way for me to look at, working, that, part of my job is to get along with my coworkers. So, whatever is happening, I need to make an effort to, be a good coworker and get along with people, because it is part of my job. And so in that case, I got some help with, with a work issue, but it wasn't, because of the 12 steps, or it wasn't directly, in response to being, or doing the 12 steps. It was in response to the fellowship of talking with another alcoholic about, my experience in trying, or in dealing with working and stuff, as someone new in recovery, and her experience as somebody with longer term recovery, keeping and maintaining and finding a good job that fit, So that's how I think that it can sometimes come about, that people will say, that it can help with everything. It's like, well, the fellowship can help because it's people sharing their experience with each other, and that can be helpful, or people can get a lot of help from that, or turn to that instead of therapy, or instead of professionals sometimes, because we talk so much about emotion in recovery, and that, you know, somebody else who is an addict or an alcoholic, you know, we have that bond of we both, you know, suffered through or experienced the same thing. And so sometimes it seems like, at least for me, it seemed like that person could relate to me a little bit better about, you know, whatever emotional issue I'm having, because they've either struggled with emotional issues that are similar, than somebody who's professional can. And that's not, you know, not always the case. And particularly when it comes to things that are medical and physical, a lot of times that it really, you know, seeing a doctor and a therapist is a better route for most people to go. So those are some of my thoughts on, you know, why maybe some people think that AA or 12 steps can solve everything is a little bit on the being able to relate to somebody who has had a shared experience. But that yeah, we're not counselors. Well, some of us are counselors, I guess. Right. But our role in AA in the fellowship is, you know, none of us are professional AAers, I guess. Right. And so yeah, so seeking outside help for, you know, a variety of issues is important and essential actually to being able to maintain long-term sobriety.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, I totally agree. One thing I wanted to address, I wanted to answer Anchor's question the best I can anyway. He says, Anchor says, does the big book or any literature say that the steps will help with anything other than alcoholism? I don't know if explicitly it says, it might, but the big book always talks in stories. And I do know that it says, like, it'll tell the story of somebody, and they say he was something like, I'm just paraphrasing, he was pleasantly surprised that his other difficulties were resolved as well. So right. yeah, you hear that a lot in the literature, that not only does it help him with the drinking, but also other things. You know, all of a sudden everybody loves them and all that kind of stuff. So yeah,
except sex relations. Sex relations have no business in AA. I'm pretty sure that's what I read in the that chapter was, you know, that does not belong. No. Yeah. So, but I agree that that a lot of the times it seems to talk in stories on that, you know, that if you fix the alcoholism, then everything else will fall in line. And I think in some cases it starts to. I think when you get rid of the substance, then, you know, you have a better chance at having a clearer head, or it makes things worse because all of your problems are then like right there in front of you, and you're not numb to them anymore. And then, you know, and so that does present you with the ability to go and seek help from professionals for the other things as well. And other, you know, 12-step groups address a lot of the problems, but I think just relying on the fellowship or on the 12 steps themselves to fix you is probably not the most useful use of that.
Yeah. Well, I can understand why someone might have that feeling, especially early on. I mean, so when of course, my story, I come in, I'm young, I'm broke, I have a lot of problems, and I stop drinking, and all of a sudden I stop adding to the problems. That's the first thing that helps a lot. You know, then by not adding, not piling on more problems, at least I can get through the problems already created for my drinking. And so life begins getting better already. And then I start meeting all kinds of different people that are giving me different input and getting different experiences. And just that contact with other people who are interested in me and me interested in them, and our common welfare and everything. It's just all of that together just kind of gives me the sense that, wow, I have found something that is going to take care of me in life. But as I got along a little bit further, and for me, it was like that second year of sobriety, where here I am sober for 2 years and I am struggling with depression. Now, I had a sponsor at the time who told me that and this was so stupid. What does he know? He worked. His job was at an assembly plant building cars. But he told me that my depression was was part of alcoholism or whatever, right? And that anyway. So he really strongly discouraged me from getting help for that specifically. And so some time went on, and it wasn't getting any better. And finally, I was hearing from other people that said that they did go to therapy. I mean, you hear both sides, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, though, the ones who say don't do this seem to be the loudest voices. But anyway, so some of these other people kind of quietly saying, hey, there's a good therapist here or there. And then finally, I do go to therapy to get help that I'm not really able to resolve through the 12 steps. And it was amazing, it helped me tremendously. I mean, I think, I don't know if I would have been able to stop smoking without that. I credit my therapy for that. And then also eventually getting me into antidepressants and so forth. So that without that, it was put it this way, there was a night and day difference for me from not having my depression treated to having it treated. So I could be sober and have a manageable life and be reasonably, I guess, sort of okay with people and so forth. But once I started paying attention to this depression and treating it and having it treated by a professional person, the difference was just night and day. So I can credit the 12 steps and the fellowship and the program with kind of giving me the, I guess, the courage, the insight, the ability to finally go and seek help. I guess it kind of helped me with that. But I needed to get out of that trap of thinking that all my problems can be solved by the 12 steps.
Yeah.
I
or
definitely
just
needed to get out of that.
by AA or getting sober.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have to learn in recovery is discernment. Both of whether what people are saying or reading from the different literature is applicable or not, but also where they fit into things, and I know in sponsoring sometimes that's a difficult line to walk as well. Of what are your suggestions for somebody dealing with a certain thing, because sometimes it's really not our place, or they might take the suggestion as being law or something, because when you're new in recovery, you want to do whatever it takes most of the time to stay sober. And so if your sponsor says don't go to a counselor, then a lot of people don't go to counselors. Yeah. And so learning discernment on, this person is helping you, with your alcoholism. You can talk to them about that and the different things that are involved in that, and it touches most of our lives in a variety of ways. It's not just the keeping the stuff out of our body. But yeah, I mean, what comes to mind is that I wouldn't have my somebody who works on my car, take out my spleen. It's like, they're different people for different things in our lives. Different tools. I mean, in a pinch, if we're in the actual zombie apocalypse, then that might be the perfect person. If I needed that organ removed. But yeah, in general, you talk to people who have skills in whatever it is that you're needing help with. Just like why most of us came to AA is that we were told, or we heard, or had some understanding that this is a place that you can go to get help for your drinking.
Right.
And so so it's just sometimes it seems some of us get stuck in that this is the only thing, the only tool, the only place. And I've found, at least for my recovery, that it has helped me immensely to seek out a whole variety of solutions or tools, additional tools that I can use to have a better life, to have a balanced life, because that's really what I want. It's not necessarily, I've learned, you know, that it's not necessarily to be happy. You know, I used to think I just want to be happy.
Right.
And I've come to a point in my life that, you know, that, yeah, I think I've shared before, if one of my kids, you know, was a serial killer and they're like, well, you know, I'm happy. You know, I don't know that I'd be that pleased with that. You know,
Mhm.
I would rather they be a contributor to society in a positive way than a serial killer, even if that made them happy. You know, now if they were doing it Dexter style, that would be okay. But, you know, there's a lot of qualifications for that. And you know, we'd have to do some evaluating. But in general, you know, I want to have a balanced life, and I need things outside of my 12-step recovery to help make that happen. Particularly in regards to, for me, finances and romances, which are the two
Mhm.
things that are often talked about as being big problems for us, and that, you know, people often don't talk about at meeting level. It's frowned upon in some places, and sometimes it's not appropriate. But you know, they're two areas that we oftentimes, many of us, struggle with. And so seeking outside help with those is, I think, essential, or it has been for me.
I do too. You know, that's kind of an interesting situation you bring up there. That okay, so our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety, and then I think there's a longer version of that that may we only help alcoholics or something. So anyway, so people say that they want to limit what's discussed in the meeting to just keep it to alcoholism and not talk about other things, right? But and it's kind of weird because sometimes other things do pertain to my alcoholism,
Mm-hmm.
and it is good for me to talk about that. But on the other hand, I guess there's a, you know, I'm not trying to say that just because I should be able to discuss those things doesn't mean that I should expect the people in that room to have answers for everything. In fact, I wouldn't even want them to. There's something weird about AA in that just having someone listen to you seems to be so helpful. And maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
that you hear yourself talk, like I'll hear myself talk in a meeting
Mm-hmm.
and other people are just listening to me. And I might be getting feedback from them visually, but no
Mm-hmm.
one's like giving me advice or anything. And that just seems to work so well. Now, after the meeting, you might talk to someone who'll say, you know what, you know, you might want to do ABC or whatever. But for the most part, I kind of like that part. I like that about 12-step fellowships in general, I guess, is that you have the ability to just to talk your whatever you want to talk about and people will listen, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Um,
think it goes back to the, you know, being somewhat on the same level. I think that's one of the difficulties sometimes people have with counseling or seeking outside help, is that it's, you
mm,
know, kind of a hierarchy thing, because this person is trained to help you in this way, and so sometimes
mm,
it can be a stumbling block for some people. But yeah, sharing in a meeting, you know, I you know, feel that that's, you know, something I have in common with everyone there. And so it doesn't matter, you know, what the person's status in society is that we
right.
know that we've all had, you know, these similar feelings or struggled with a similar issue. And there is something that's very helpful in sharing at meetings. You know, sometimes I won't know that I've, you know, been circling on a subject all day until I go to a meeting and someone asks me to share, and then, you know, I verbally vomit something, and then I'm like, oh, I'm suddenly, I didn't know that was bothering me so much. Now I know. You know, that'll happen. But yeah, it's there was another point that I wanted to make on what you said regarding meetings and talking. And I think it was also on what Anchor was saying. I can't think of what it was now, but
Hmm.
I'll just go back to, you know, what Anchor was saying about the life coaching thing.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that is something that I think you know, I don't know that it's necessarily a problem. It's just something that I've noticed, you know, within myself and in other people, is, you know, that we form these relationships and we, you know, want to be helpful. And so sometimes it does turn into sounding like, you know, a life coach or a counselor or something like that. And so it's one of the things that I have to work on as something to be mindful of. Am I sharing with this person something they asked for my experience on, or am I trying to heal them, or cure them, or whatever, fix them. So it's something that I have to be mindful of and take accountability
What's interesting about that too is that you read so much. I mean, you have a lot of information in your head from everything that you read about, psychology and all the current.
I brought 6 books to sit in front of me in case for the discussion.
So it's like it's like that becomes part of your experience though too.
Right.
So it's like so it's almost, I can see where it could be natural that if someone comes to you and it's like you pull something out of one of the books that you've read that this is something that and I can understand that. So because you are really knowledgeable, you've read a lot of you read a lot of books.
Yeah. Thanks. But yeah, I think why I brought it up, or one of the things that came to mind is or why I need to be mindful is what you said before. In early recovery, oftentimes, we're just grasping at whatever somebody says. So, if your sponsor told you not to get counseling, so you didn't seek it for a long time, because, you were, this person helped you get or stay sober for a certain amount of time. And so there's that bond there. And so, I imagine would have seemed a little bit like, you were going against your mentor, or, or were ungrateful if you went to counseling when they suggested that you not. And so I have to remember that sometimes people may perceive my sharing of information or ideas with them as in a similar way. Right. And I don't want that to be the case. So. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I try to avoid that too. I mean, I don't really get into sponsorship relationships anymore. I haven't for a while. I think I did sponsor somebody in our group once, and it was a really great experience. And I got to I went through the 5th step with him, and that was great. But for the most part, I really haven't been sponsoring people since I've gotten involved with secularly formatted meetings, and it's not because the meetings themselves don't encourage sponsorship. Most of the people in the group probably do enter in those relationships. I just, for whatever reason, don't do that. I did back in my old group, because at that time that's what we did, and so I did there a lot of it, but I don't so much anymore. And it's going to be interesting. I do want to get involved with with peer support. I don't know in what capacity, but I want to do it under supervision, so that I'm not acting like some person who is. I just want to be a peer. I just want to be a regular peer to somebody, and that's the strength of AA. Is that. And the cool thing about being a peer support specialist is that you are that, but with an overriding supervision, that you have an expert, that you can go to. You have resources that you're attached to that are beyond your own experience, and so that's kind of nice, because it almost gives you like a safety valve that, okay, I'm getting too deep into the woods here, so I can say, no, I'm not qualified for this part. You need to go over here for that. And that's good training, to know, because otherwise, I'm sure there's been many times I'm sitting in a meeting and, I'm trying my best to help somebody, and I'm not even thinking about resources that this person could avail himself to or herself to.
Right.
So.
Yeah. No, I think that probably would be helpful, by knowing that you have somebody who is a resource to you, that, that it is, kind of a hierarchical position, but, just having that can be helpful, because then it reminds you that, you are, that you're on the same level as the person that you're working with. Whereas sometimes I think we can get some time in AA, or do a bunch of stuff and then forget that, that we're just, peers helping each other stay sober. And not profits. And, bleeding deacons or whatever else in recovery.
Even when I think about it, some of the best help that I ever got was people that were informing me of resources. The first time I went to therapy, it was at a place that charged on a sliding scale. I never knew about it. I never knew these kind of things existed until someone brought it to my attention. And there's all kinds of resources out there that I'm still learning about, and it's just to have that information to give to somebody is incredibly helpful. Because people, I speak for myself. I never thought about that. I never thought about, oh boy, I have no money. I can't get help is what I would think. I can't go to a psychiatrist. I can't go to a counselor. I don't have any money. And then you find out, oh, there are ways
Right.
that you can get that kind of help.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something that, that has been helpful for me in sponsorship. For a long time, because I shared before that oftentimes things will come up in the fourth step, the way that I take people through it, that I'm not trained to guide people through, and oftentimes, like you and I, these people, don't have health insurance or other, income that can, help them pay for a highly qualified therapist, and so seeking out those different resources and has been helpful to me, so that I can point people in the direction of people who either provide services for free or sliding scale or whatever, so that those are available to other people.
Yeah,
that's been really important, because I don't know that I've worked with a person who hasn't needed some sort of professional, and sometimes we discover it in early writing, and sometimes it's at the fourth step, but generally, there is. And so knowing what those are and being able to direct people to that has been, what I think is really helpful to me, and essential, because again, it reminds me, it right sizes me, I guess, that I'm not qualified to work with somebody on, certain issues, and that it would be more harmful to them if I tried to. So that is helpful. What other things have you done that you have found helpful that are outside of AA?
Well, what I was kind of thinking about is my the first 10 years of my involvement. I guess I did start going to therapy later during that first 10 years, but towards the latter part. But for the first 10 years, for the most part, I was following what people were suggesting in the rooms. And for the most part, the loudest voices that I was hearing was that your problem is that you're an alcoholic, and alcoholics, blah, blah, blah. Those are the loudest voices. But there were the quiet people who said, no, there are other things you can do. There are other things you can do. But I wasn't listening to those quiet voices that, I was listening to the loud ones. But it was after it's hard to say. I often divide my recovery up into decades, but now that I think about it, even that first 10 years, there were things that I was doing outside of the fellowship that were very, very helpful to me. And some of the things were forced on me. Like, for example, when the first thing that happened to me was the judge said, okay, you're not going to go to jail, but you got to go to this community addictions program. So I was forced to go to it. But it turns out it was helpful. It was something outside of AA, and I was getting information that was not necessarily what I'm getting in AA. And there were professional people there. Now, if I screwed up, they would send me to jail. But still,
there's motivation. Your higher power was there.
Yeah.
It was the court system.
Yeah. So, but even the court system was in its way helpful. I mean, there was a judge there. Yeah, there was a judge there that was looking at me and thinking, oh God, what am I going to do with this guy? Is it going to help for him to go to jail for 6 months, or maybe there's another way? And the judge showed some compassion and said, okay, I'm going to give you a chance. You can go to this community addictions program. So I go to this community addictions program, and the people there are pretty nice. You know, they did want me to pay, you know, and I, but they were fairly nice, and I did learn some things there. I didn't like going there, but when I think about it in retrospect, it was people outside of AA that were doing their best to help me. I can even go back even further to the cops who arrested me when I was drunk. Even they, you know, they were actually treating me okay for the most part. So if I remember right, I think that last time they were. There was one time they didn't treat me so well. Anyway, I don't know what I'm talking about now. Anyway, so but as far as other things that I do now, so yeah, so okay, so for me, my first experience was going to that place that charged on a sliding scale, and there was a person with a master's degree that kind of helped me with whatever my issues were at the time. I can't even remember what they were, but anyway, he helped me out a lot. And then I finally went to a therapist, actually group therapy, to deal with depression. And that person I learned about from the fellowship, from somebody in the fellowship. It was group therapy. And what was so weird is a guy from my home group was in that group therapy with me. And so I got to know him in a different way. And the group therapy was set up different from an AA meeting because it was kind of, the doctor was kind of helping, you know, everything. And I got so much out of it. I just got a lot out of that. He was such a great psychologist. And then from there, I did go eventually to a psychiatrist and actually get medication for depression because I just felt I think I needed it, and it still helps me. So those were those resources that I was using. And then physically and stuff, going to a doctor eventually and getting myself checked out and trying to take reasonable care of myself and all of that. But it took me a while, Angela, to be honest with you. I had to kind of dip my toes in the water when it came to outside help. I just because I did buy into to what Joe was saying in the reading there. I put AA on a pedestal. I put the 12 steps on a pedestal, that this is going to be the elixir to all my problems. And that is dangerous, you know, but that thinking was kind of instilled in me by what some of the louder voices in the rooms were saying. So, but yeah, I kind of grew out of that over time, you know, I did. And now I'm still learning. I'm just amazed at how much I'm still learning about what I can do to help myself, what resources are available for me to go to get help, and how outside of AA, outside of the 12 steps, the problem that I run into is that, like, and I think other people like me, and you might be like this too, is that I've spent such a large portion of my life involved with the 12 steps that I automatically apply those to whatever's going on in my life. And sometimes I have to step back and say, you know, eventually I step back, something happens that causes me to say, oh no, I need some other kind of help. This isn't working. So I can still kind of run into that, I guess, but I've grown, you know. It's just kind of a gradual process, and 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing, you know, and then until eventually you kind of get comfortable. That was another thing. I was incredibly uncomfortable, Angela, going to a professional and asking for help and seeking help. I still had this. I still had mental illness stigmatized. I was terrified of being like my mom. I, for some reason, thought that my employer would find out that I'm seeing a psychiatrist or something. And I had all kinds of weird thoughts in my head. So I had a lot of fear about that too. And it took me a little while to kind of go beyond that. So, oh, wow. I hope that was kind of an answer to your question.
Yeah. And then some. It was great. One of the things that you talked about with the louder voices, I was thinking about that, and my guess, you know, when I think about, at least for me, it was probably I heard the louder voices because, you know, the inner voices were so loud that it only, you know, all I could hear were the loud people in the room, because I was busy chattering in my own brain about, you know, what what's happening or
Isn't
wasn't
that the truth?
happening, or, you know, all of that. And so, yeah, so I do think that it takes time. And I think somebody mentioned that in the comments, that, you know, what AA gives us is time to, you know, to slow down and to be able to, you know, prepare for, you know, the journey of life, I guess, you know,
Yeah.
in a profound way. But yeah, it helps us with that. And, you know, the stigma around mental health, I think that for me, you know, it's always been such a part of my life, that, you know, I was in Alateen, and, you know, there was even some therapy before that, you know, and so it's just always been a part of, you know, my repertoire. You know, my toolbox has always had therapy in it.
That's good.
when I've chosen to use it, you know, and so it hasn't been stigmatizing for me. I think it's important, and you know, I've always been a little bit concerned or hesitant towards people who haven't been to therapy, because, you know, it's such an important tool, I think, for people, that I get concerned that, you know, well, does that mean that they believe whatever they hear in their head? You know, they're being driven by ego. That scares me. And so, yeah, so it's important to me that people do seek therapy, you know, in my friendships, because then I feel like it helps them. It helps me have relationships, because then I can be open and honest in a way that I can't with people who don't seek therapy, because, you know, when I have had disagreements with some friends that don't, oftentimes it leads to resentment. And even if I go through all of my tools to try to remedy the situation, take responsibility, you know, all of that kind of stuff, it doesn't always help, because they don't have the capacity to be able to look within themselves and even accept an apology. So yeah, so therapy for me is super important to have in the people that I surround myself with. And I guess that's part of, you know, a thing as well that I've learned is to choose, you know, who I have in my life. And today I've learned to choose to have people that seem to be actively wanting to continue to learn or make progress in life. And when I was drinking, and you know, I really didn't care. I thought that I was hanging out with those people because we were all, you know, very smart hipsters hanging out, you know, at the bar, you know, waxing poetic about, you know, all of our degrees and stuff, and the things we were going to do, and the books we were going to write, and, you know, all that stuff that we never actually did. So yeah, those are my thoughts on it. But yeah, for me, therapy's been essential. I think it's really, really important. Reading, yeah. Somebody, I think, mentioned in here, you know, about alternative 12 steps, that they hear a lot of people in secular meetings talking about them, but they don't do them, or they don't, you know, actually follow the books. And so, yeah, so I just wanted to mention that that I do and have from the beginning, and that the Alternative 12 Steps, Secular Guide to Recovery by Martha Cleveland and Arliss G. and Roger in the current edition, that was huge for me, and that's been a major tool for me to use for many years, and that the one with Jeffrey Munn, his is great as well, because what I like about his is it's very practical. So for people that come into meetings and are very anti, you know, anything spiritual, or the word spiritual even, then I often recommend that book, because it is super practical. And it also gets at what, you know, I didn't hear very much in early recovery, which was the physical part of things, you know, not only just the physicality of, you know, alcoholism, but just like learning that, you know, exercise is helpful in maintaining my recovery, you know, that it's you know, essential for my physiology to be balanced. And I didn't hear a lot of that. And I think that in that book. He talks about that as well as meditation. I think that, meditation is still a difficult subject for some people. But I think these days there's so many different ways to learn to either meditate or at least use mindfulness in some sort of capacity that it's a bit more accessible than it was, at least in my early recovery.
Yep.
Yeah, so those are some of the things that have been helpful to me, or that I wanted to address with that question regarding the 12 steps. Oh, and also that new book that came out in January that you just did a podcast
Oh yeah,
with.
that's a good one.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that because you mentioned that he looked at the fourth step in a completely different way, and so I'm curious about that, because I do the fourth step in a completely different way than a lot of people do. So I'm wondering how he came about his idea for how to look at it. And that's another thing that I love about the secular community, and we were talking about it in my home group last night, was that that we share books and recommendations and podcasts with each other that we find useful, and so yeah, that book was actually mentioned last night in my home group, and so I think several people are going to check it out, and I wanted to bring it up in this conversation because I'm curious about it and interested in what that was, and I haven't heard the podcast yet.
That might be something that is kind of different or unique between a secular AA meeting and another meeting, in that we do kind of welcome outside literature, whereas at a lot of AA meetings, not all of them, but a lot of them don't want outside literature in their meetings, and you won't hear a lot of recommendations like for a book, or something like that. Whereas you hear that frequently, and among us, you hear that a lot, that, hey, here's a great book, or here's another way to think about the steps, blah, blah, blah. That's really some valuable stuff. That's a lot of creativity. And that's really something to think, it's pretty incredible that we have that. And that's the way I think AA should be everywhere. It should be like that. But something happened along the way. Joe was mentioning, M said that in the 70s and 80s, the book Living Sober was popular. So that must have been, I can definitely see it in the 70s, and it must have been maybe the early 80s, because I came in 1988. And at that time, the program must have been getting, people in the program must have been getting a little bit more conservative, because at my group anyway, they would tell me how bad the book Living Sober was, that I shouldn't ever read it, that it's not the program and all this kind of stuff. Right. So that's the message that I got about that book. But I'm sure that if I would have come in maybe 10 years earlier when the book was new, I'm sure everybody loved it. Isn't that funny?
Right.
But something just changed.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of the time, and it probably hit different places at different times, but the whole synonym cult kind of took over, mainstream AA, and theirs was much more of a militant form of AA, and it seeped in, and I think that the larger AA community and the trustees and people are trying to get some awareness now about that experience, and that's not how scholars interpret the program's supposed to be and things, but that's my sense of where that came in, was about that time was that was happening, and so there became this very strict adherence to the big book as almost as scripture rather than stories and suggestions, and I didn't hear a lot about living sober when I got sober. I heard that it's a book that existed, but it wasn't something I was interested in reading. A few people said that it was a bit more secular, so I might check it out, and I did, and the main thing I got out of it was that it was okay for me to be eating the amount of sugar that I was consuming at that time, and so I did appreciate that. Because that's one of the things it talks about is, alcohol has a lot of sugar in it, and sometimes we don't, think about that. And as we're getting sober or detoxing, that can have an effect as well. And so eating hard candy is, I think, one of the things that it suggested. So there was that. As far as other literature, I think only the 12 and 12. I've had to work on one. I don't care for it, to be honest. But also, my biggest issue is when people call it the 12 by 12. And I didn't have that issue until somebody else said, it's not the 12 by 12, it's the 12 and 12. And suddenly I had an opinion on it. And so I've had to work with that. And I did use the 12 and 12 a little bit. With step 6 and 7 in sponsoring people for a while, because there wasn't a lot at the time when I was first sponsoring people that I could share on how to do that. But as I gained some years in recovery and read more, I was able to incorporate a way to understand them that is, I think, helpful for secular people.
It's funny. There was a time. Of course, if you're in recovery long enough, you have all kinds of thoughts and ideas, and you evolve. But there was a time when I thought that, when I loved the 12 and 12, I thought it was a great book. I thought, oh wow, this really delves deeper into the steps and the blah blah blah. But I tell you what, man, I can't stand the book now. There's a lot of God in that book, and there's a lot of things.
They got all over the place. Yeah.
Oh man, all over. And then that's actually where they say that the atheists are savages. Isn't that the word that we're called savages? I think in the 12 book. Yeah. So that I can't. I have a hard time with that book now. In fact, when I was actually back some time ago now, I'm still at my old home group, and we haven't yet started our meeting in Kansas City, and we're reading. I think it was in step 2 from the 12 and 12. And they start defining in there what an atheist is and what an agnostic is, and they're completely incorrect. It says something like the believer claims proof of God, the atheist claims proof of no God, and then the agnostic doesn't know, or something like that, right?
The dumbass agnostic, what the hell?
And it was like, no, it's so stupid. First of all, I don't even think believers claim proof of God. I mean, because that's not even even faith,
John,
right?
just look outside your door.
Anyway, it drives me crazy.
Yeah, it can be a stumbling block, and it has been for a lot of people. So it's really nice that we have a lot of literature, and that I don't attend a lot of traditional meetings anymore. Well, I don't attend anything in person anymore, but even online. But I'll still make suggestions, and if I think it's appropriate, and I guess because I've been around a little bit, not as long as you. I take license in doing that because I know they can't kick me out of AA. And so if it's appropriate to help somebody, or to at least mention that there are alternatives to whatever it is that they're going through, then I definitely mention them. So it's not been an issue for me as far as that. But I do like that within the secular meetings, people just share whatever book is helpful to them. You know, like I didn't even know there was like a Stoic 12-step thing for a while, and guided meditation type of a thing. And I love that there are all those different options, because it makes it much easier to help new people who are struggling. And particularly in this time, I think the book recommendations are helpful because most of us aren't meeting in person anyway. So having those resources can be essential to people. Something that they can get right away, and that they don't have they're not sitting in a meeting with us breathing down their necks, making sure they understand or anything like that. They can consume them at their leisure and stuff. So I say keep sharing the resources. And one of the things too, do we have enough time? Just a few minutes, but people who we're talking in our Facebook group. One of the things that I'm liking the conversation right now is on, I believe it was somebody who expressed that they were newer in recovery and suffering from depression, and what thoughts on microdosing psilocybin, what people had. And I like the diversity of comments and thoughts that I've read, from some people that had experiences in the 60s where, they used similar substances and were not able to control them, so, helpful to know on that. And people who do that, who are microdosing psilocybin and currently, are in recovery, and support, some people supporting those people and reminding them that, don't let anybody say that you're not, sober. And then, my thoughts on it were that I have heard a lot and read some things about it being helpful to people, to addicts, alcoholics, and people who have terminal cancer as well. But that I would suggest that the person considering it find somebody who is a qualified therapist who understands how it works and can guide you through the process. I would be concerned for myself. I wouldn't, check that out as a treatment method unless I had those things in place. But that, I like the idea that we're looking at that stuff again. And I know that Johns Hopkins is studying it, as well as some other places, and ketamine treatments, that's being studied again as well. And so, there's quite a few options for people who are trying to get sober, as well as I mentioned internal family systems and self-directed leadership as something that has been discussed as bringing about a similar state of mind to the experience some people have on psilocybin without, the drug itself. And so I would check that out if it's something that you're considering. Plus, I just really enjoy internal family systems as a therapeutic method. It kind of takes the hypnosis type of a direction, because you learn to be guided in your thoughts, but it's something that you can do on your own once you understand the idea of what's going on. It's something that you don't have to have a therapist for the rest of your life, which is how a lot of us grew up thinking about therapy, is that you just go for years and years and years. This is a method that you can learn, and then if you need help, you can go to somebody. But it does combine kind of the idea of a guided thinking type thing. And then there's also holotropic breathing. And it's not something that I've tried, but I have heard and read a little bit about it. And it seems to also bring about, an altered state without using chemicals that can be helpful in accessing parts of you that have experienced trauma or have things that that you're not really able to get to in regular talk therapy. And so those are a couple of things that I would check out if that's something that you feel like you think that you need, or if you're looking for something else, because recovery at this point, AA 12 steps, those are doing their job and keeping you sober, but you may be feeling depressed and anxious and all of that kind of stuff. There are additional resources, and those are a couple of things that, and I just love that that's a discussion that we're having in that group, and that thus far, I think it's been civil. I haven't read every single comment, but for the most part, it's civil, in that there's a lot of different views and experiences, and for the most part, people are just very open to that, to lots of different ideas. I think that we tend to be people that are just wanting people to be relieved of the suffering of addiction, and that lots of different ways are being checked out, and I'm supportive of that.
Well, I love this reading. I thought it was a good reminder to have realistic expectations about what you might be able to get out of the 12 steps, or just 12-step fellowships in general. Something I didn't ever bring up, but one of the dangers of looking at the 12 steps as a cure-all is that I've done this before, is that I feel like I'm depressed because I'm not working the step correctly. It's all my fault because I'm not doing the step the way my sponsor says it should be done. And I've heard other people use the steps in a way to beat themselves up, just like I have done.
Yeah.
And if I could just have a realistic, expectation that no, this is not going to cure everything that's wrong with me, but it's kind of a framework where I might be able to guide myself through life and maybe get to resources that will help me with some of these other things. But it did help me with my drinking, and it helped me with a lot of other issues in my life, and I'm grateful for that. So Bree says not to beat yourself up, and I agree with that. So that's it. We came up on an hour. Thank you, everybody. It's been wonderful. Really nice crowd there tonight. I don't have anything else to say, but have a nice weekend, everyone. Y'all take care. Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.